Okay, so let's begin with the first edit. In the first part of the course, we will be working with this portrait of Olga. That's our starting point. So this TIFF I have exported from the Adobe Camera Raw and I went for neutral white balance. I had already in my mind some idea for color for the final effect I wanted to achieve. However, I wanted to be on a safe side and I haven't applied any significant changes to the photo temperature. So I went for the neutral white balance, and that way I have really huge flexibility. So we will begin with this image. This is our starting point, and let me show you the final result. We will be aiming towards this color grade. So let me show you all the steps we will be performing during this edit. First, as usual, we will start with very quick cleanup. In case of this model, she's very beautiful, she has very pretty skin, so there is no need to work on a cleanup. Next, we will focus on dodge and burn to smoothen up the skin to make this image more harmonious. Next, we will perform basic luminosity adjustment, we will sharpen the image, and in the last stage of this edit, we will work on color. So let me just select all these layers and let me delete them, and we will start at the same point. So let's begin with the first edit. So as I've already mentioned, in case of this image we won't have much work when working on the cleanup. Let's just zoom in. I have hit Alt Command 0 to have this image at 100% magnification, and I can just check what is the condition here. The upper part of the body of the model was out of focus, so I don't have to work on this part at all. I'm just going to quickly fix some of these blemishes on the skin. To do this, I will be working with the spot filling brush tool. You can either hit J on your keyboard or select the tool from the toolbar. Having the tool selected, is important to set the hardness of your brush to 100%. So let's just quickly right click on the image and now in hardness set 100%. The size of the brush we can either set here or we can do this dynamically by hitting left or right square bracket. When I'm hitting left square bracket, I'm decreasing size of the brush. When I'm hitting right square bracket, I'm increasing size of the brush. That's the fastest, the most effective way of working with the brush size, and it works with any other tool in Photoshop that uses kind of brush. So either if it's brush, if it's stamp, spot healing brush tool, you can always use this keyboard shortcut. Left square bracket decreasing and right square bracket increasing size of the brush. So let's keep it around this size, so the brush will be around the size of the blemishes that I want to remove from the image. So first of all, let's duplicate the layer. We are working with the original image, so we have only one layer. Let's select the layer and let's just hit on the keyboard Command J. That way I have duplicated the layer and I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to call it Cleanup. So that way we will keep things tidy. Having the cleanup layer selected, select the spot healing brush tool, hit J on your keyboard, and let's just perform the very quick cleanup. So let's increase size of the brush a little bit, hardness set at 100%, and let's just paint over these little spots on the face that we want to remove. That way we can either remove small blemishes from the model's skin, we can as well remove some dead pixels. So this is going to be really fast. As I've mentioned before, her skin is very pretty. There is no need to spend a lot of time on it, and remember, this is not a beauty retouch, so we want to keep this image natural. In the end, I want to just focus on color, but having a really good base image is important. However, I don't want to make her look artificial. I want to make her look at her best day, but natural and maintain the fresh and vibrant look. So basically, in case of this image, this will be it. I don't want to remove any other elements in this image. Maybe let's have a look a little bit here. We could work on the hair, we could remove the stray hair with the stamp tool. In order to do this, let's hit S on the keyboard. So that way I have stamp selected. Let's increase size of the brush by hitting right square bracket. Now I'm going to be sampling from the area beside the hair, and I'm going to be covering the hair, this element that I want to get rid of, with pixels sampled. So let's just decrease a bit size of the brush. You need to be precise when you're working on the cleanup. The smaller the size of your brush, the better. The more precise you are, the better. The more seamless will be the final result. So to sample pixels, let's press and hold Alt key and click in the area that we want to sample pixels from. So I have the Alt key pressed and I'm holding it. I'm clicking here to sample pixels, and now I have released Alt key, and I'm just going to cover the stray hair, the element that I want to get rid of. We can repeat the operation of sampling, and that way we can work on retouching, on removing bigger elements. Let's just step back. So I hit Command Z, and let's just maybe get rid of this part. It's important to be really precise and work in a way that won't be recognizable in the end. We don't want people to see that the image was photoshopped. So when it comes to cleanup, that's it. I'm not going to be working on this stray hair. The image is strong, it was really well lit, so the viewer's attention immediately goes to the model's face, to her very intense gaze, and I don't need to worry about other elements. The hair is a bit out of focus, so it's not worrying me at all. So that way we have performed a very quick cleanup. This is what we have achieved in this clip. That's the stage after performing the quick cleanup, and let's switch off this layer, and this is the initial point. So we are ready to jump to the next video and start working on dodge and burn. See you in the next clip. In the previous clip we have performed a very quick cleanup, so this was our starting point, and that's our image after working with pot healing brush tool. Remember that here patience pays off. It's really important to prepare the image for dodge and burn and to have it really in a decent condition, because it doesn't make sense to rush to move over to dodge and burn and coloring if we have still the skin looking not well. So having the image prepared, we are ready to start working on dodge and burn. Dodge and burn is a retouching technique that is based on luminosity levels in the image. So to work with dodge and burn, we are going to first create a help layer that will convert the image temporarily to black and white. So let's move over to the layers panel and let's select the middle icon, and from here select the first option, solid color adjustment layer. It doesn't matter what color you will go for, since we will be working with zero saturation. It's just important to have brightness, this value set at 50%. So let's confirm, let's hit OK, and now let's set the blending mode of this layer to color, and that way we have created the helper layer. Let's just rename it, let's call it help, and I'm going to group it with itself. So having the layer selected, I'm hitting Command G on my keyboard, and I'm going to rename the group layer to help as well. So that way I have created the helper layer, and as I've mentioned before, it's important to work when you are working on dodge and burn with black and white image, since that way we can focus only on luminosity adjustments. The dodge and burn technique is based on luminosity, so we will be working with dark and bright areas in the image, for example, to smoothen out the skin, to get rid of these darker lines on the model's face. We will be making the dark area brighter to make it even with the adjacent areas. So if we wouldn't have this layer, we will be looking at color, and it's really distracting. It's not helping when working on dodge and burn. We have the cyan background, we have this strong eye, this mixture of yellow and green, we have this magenta subtle lips. However, the color is already strong enough to distract us from the luminosity in this image. So it's much easier, it's much more helpful if we first turn the image to black and white. Remember that we are working with adjustment layers, which means we are working in a non-destructive way, and after performing the dodge and burn we can always get rid of this folder, we can switch off helper and continue working on color. So having the helper layer created, we can create the first dodge and burn stack. In order to do this, let's maybe just close this folder to keep things tidy and organized, and let's add the first curves adjustment layer. Let's move over towards the layers panel and let's select from here curves. So I'm just going to rename this curve to D, so this will take care of dodging. I'm going to duplicate this layer, I'm hitting Command J, and I'm just going to rename this layer to B, since this adjustment layer will take care of burning. Let's select the dodge adjustment layer and let's move the control point that I will position in the middle of this line. Let's move it slightly upwards. That way this adjustment layer will take care of brightening the image, of making the pixels brighter. And now let's select the burn adjustment layer and let's do the opposite. Here, having the burn adjustment layer selected, I'm just going to add control point in the middle again. However, I'm going to pull it downwards, so this adjustment layer will take care of darkening selected areas in the image. Notice that these adjustment layers come with masks automatically created by Photoshop. So if I switch them off, if I switch on dodge, and if I switch it off, we can see that this adjustment layer will take care of brightening the image. And at this point I'm just going to invert the mask, since I want to target specific areas within the image. I don't want to have it applied over the whole picture. So let's just select the mask and let's hit Command I on the keyboard to invert the mask to black, so this adjustment is not active now. Let's repeat the same with the burn adjustment layer. If I switch it on, you can see that it's darkening the image, so I don't want to have it applied over the whole picture. I want to reveal it by painting on the mask. So let's invert the mask. Let's select the mask first and let's hit again Command I. So that way these layers are not visible, and I will make them visible. I will make these adjustments visible in the image by painting over these two masks with brush tool. So now let's select these two masks. I'm selecting the first one, now hitting and holding Shift key, selecting the second, and I'm going to group them. I'm hitting Command G, and I'm just going to rename this folder to local dodge and burn, since with this first folder I will take care of local dodge and burn adjustments. I will brighten a little bit these areas in the model's face. I will be targeting small areas and I will be correcting further the skin of the model. And I'm just going to duplicate this folder. So having the local dodge and burn folder selected, I'm just hitting Command J, and let's just rename this folder to global dodge and burn. global dodge and burn, and that way I just saved some time since I didn't have to recreate all these layers. So I just created the local dodge and burn, then duplicated, since basically the operation will be very similar, but with the global dodge and burn we will be working with more vast areas in this image. We will be adding more depth, we will be working on three-dimensionality. We will be shaping the face on a global level. Okay, so let's now close these folders, and I just want to move helper to the very top of the layers stack, and having all these three folders selected, I'm just going to hit Command G and rename it to dodge and burn. So that way we have everything organized. This is our dodge and burn folder, this is our cleanup, and this is our starting point. So by creating all those adjustment layers, we are ready to start working on dodge and burn. So let's jump to the next video and let's begin working on dodging and burning. Before we actually dive into dodging and burning, let's quickly evaluate the image. The point here is to really stress out that you shouldn't be making these adjustments mindlessly. It's very important to decide which areas in the image can be fixed, which should be touched, and which shouldn't be really affected at all. So I'm going to add a simply helper layer at the very top of the layer stack. You don't need to do this, I'm just doing this for the sake of this quick presentation. So by looking at this image, we can see that the main source of light was positioned here, so the light is hitting the left-hand side of the model's face. On the other side I have positioned reflector, so that way I have made the right-hand side of her face a little bit brighter. I have reflected a bit of this light. However, the idea for this portrait is to maintain this very strong contrast, and I wanted to have this shadow that is positioned in the middle of her face. So now when we will be working on dodging and burning, the idea is to slightly retouch the face to even out the skin. However, we have to respect the initial idea for the lighting, and we have to work with the lighting, not against it. So having said that, I mean that I want to retouch these areas. I want to make these lines a little bit brighter, so the skin will be a little bit more even. I can focus a bit as well on brightening these areas under her eyes, making these shadows a little bit brighter. However, I'm not going to be touching this shadow at all on her forehead, because it is creating simply by the lighting. The same goes for this shadow on her nose and on this shadow in the middle of her chin. I want to stress out that you should never perform any adjustments in Photoshop without really understanding why are you doing them. Never work mindlessly. So remember, never work against the image, never work against the lighting that was set for the portrait, for the image in the first place, and by sticking to these principles, your images will be much more powerful, you will be working in a much more effective way. So look at the areas in the image that can be adjusted and keep your retouching work balanced, so that way your final result will be seamless. Okay, so after this quick evaluation, I can just get rid of this helper layer and we can actually jump into dodging and burning. Okay, so let's start with dodging. As you remember from the previous video with the local dodging and burning with both local and global, I'm just going to retouch slightly the skin. I'm just going to even out the skin, and with the global dodge and burn I will be shaping the model's face, however respecting of course the natural shape and the lighting that was created in the first place during the photoshoot. So let's start with local dodge and burn. I'm just going to open this folder and we will be working with dodging, which means we will be making selected areas in the image brighter. So let's zoom out and remember that this is not a beauty retouch. If we were working on a beauty retouch, we'll be really working with a very huge zoom, with a really huge magnification. We'll be really looking closely at every pore in her skin. However, as I mentioned before, this is not a beauty retouch, that's a portrait, and such a huge magnification is not needed. During the dodge and burn stage, we'll be addressing certain selected areas in the picture, like the area under her eye or those lines beside the nose. However, we want to maintain the natural look of the model. So let's select the dodge adjustment layer and let's select brush. So either hit B on your keyboard or you can select brush from the Photoshop toolbar. Now, having the brush selected, it's important to set opacity and flow. Opacity 100% is fine. Remember to keep flow really low. So we are going to be working with the values between 2 and 5%. Let's maybe start with 3% and we'll see how it goes. The last thing to set here is to select this airbrush build-up icon. That way you will be able to strengthen the effect simply by pressing and holding your brush. You don't have to hit several times to make the stroke stronger. So set opacity to 100, flow to 3% and select the airbrush icon. And having the brush selected, remember the same as we were working before with the spot healing brush, you can increase or decrease size of the brush simply by hitting left or right square bracket on your keyboard. So let's set size brush around this value and let's right click on the image. What is important here is to set hardness of your brush to 0%. We will be working with a very soft brush. So I am having selected one of these soft brushes, very soft edge, and let's set hardness at 0. So having the brush set that way, let's slightly focus in a little bit more, maybe not as much. And having the mask of the dodge layer selected, we will be revealing now this effect by painting with soft brush with white color on a black mask. So remember to set these values for the colors that way. Simply hit D on your keyboard. This will reset any colors. If you have any other colors positioned here, simply by hitting D, they will be set to default black and white, and by hitting X on your keyboard you can swap between black and white. So we will have the black mask. To make these adjustments visible in the image, we have to be painting with white color. So I need to hit X, I swap these color samples, and now I have brush selected with white color. So now I'm just going to be painting over darker areas in the picture that I would like to make more even, that I would like to actually brighten up a little bit. This technique takes a lot of practice to master, so we need to be patient. However, it really pays off. So what we are doing now is we are painting in a very subtle way over this slightly darker area in the picture that we would like to even out a little bit. Notice that while I'm painting, this result is almost not visible. However, you can very quickly check the result by switching on and off the layer. So with these very few strokes, I have already achieved a little bit more of the effect that I'm after. Never overdo this. It's better to work in a subtle way and to build up this effect gradually. So just keep zooming in and out to really see what you are doing. We can try to retouch this part. So to do this, I have to zoom out quite strongly, and I'm just simply painting over this darker patch. That way I will be able to make the luminosity levels of the adjacent areas of the skin the same value as the targeted area. So if I switch off and on, you can see that working that way. The adjustment is very subtle, but that's the power of the dodging and burning technique. Since this way you can really perfect the skin, you can really perform very powerful adjustments that will be seamlessly blended in your final image. So let's zoom out again and let's get back to the eye area. I'm just going to make this shadow under her eye a little bit less visible. However, I want to maintain the texture of the skin. I want to keep the natural look. So let's switch off now on the layer and let's get back maybe to this area on the nose. And let's get back to the forehead. It's really important to zoom in and out, because if I would be working on such a strong magnification, you can really get lost in all those tiny details. However, very often these very small details won't be visible in your final presentation. So depending on where do you want to display the image, if it's just for the web, it's very often not needed to go into all these small details. For the sake of this course, I just want to show you what can be done with this technique, and you should be able to perform all these adjustments, and then depending on the image that you are working with, you can decide to which degree, to which level you want to retouch, and what can be just left simply because it's not needed to work on such details. So let's just move over closer to the nose and notice that just within a few seconds we already performed quite a strong adjustment. Here we need to be more careful. I just want to make this line slightly less visible. However, I don't want to get rid of this completely. So let's paint over it in a very subtle way. I'm working very quickly for the sake of this presentation, for the sake of this course. You can spend much more time, you can be much more precise. So let's make this shadow a little bit less visible as well, to even out the skin a little bit more here. Let's not paint over this brighter patch, since it will make it brighter as well. Let's keep it as it is, and let's just paint over those darker areas. So in case of this image, the initial setting flow to 3% is working quite well. Let's move over here and make this area a little bit brighter as well. Let's switch on and off the layer. So as you can see, working that way with a soft brush with white color, we can gradually build up the effect and really retouch the skin in a very beautiful way. So let's zoom out and let's switch this layer on and off. I would like to make this line brighter. So let's maybe switch on the mask. I'm just going to press and hold Alt key and click on the mask. That way I can see what I have painted already. And as you can see here, I have already painted quite strongly. I have covered this area on the image with white color, so it means that within this adjustment layer I'm not going to achieve any further brightening effect. So let's get back to the image. I'm pressing and holding Alt key and clicking on the mask. If I would like to make this area brighter, I would have to create another dodge adjustment layer, which I'm going to do. So let's move over to this icon in the middle, And let's select curves again. Let's rename this layer to Dodge 2, so I'm just going to call it D2, and let's select the thumbnail. Here I'm going to add a control point and move it upwards as well, and I'm just going to invert the mask. So having the mask selected, I'm just hitting Command I. I'm going to be painting again with a soft brush, exactly the same as on the previous layer, since I'm not able to make this area brighter on this first adjustment layer. I have to multiply the effect of brightening. So having the mask of my second dodging layer selected, I will be painting again with my brush, and that way I will be able to target this specific area. It's better to create several adjustment layers rather than move the control point on the first adjustment layer much further upwards. So that way I have more control over the technique, I have more flexibility, and if I'm not happy with this adjustment, I can simply get rid of this adjustment layer. I can simply delete it without affecting other areas. Since the first dodge adjustment layer was taking care not only of this area here, I was working on the area around the eye, on the chin. So with the second adjustment layer dodging, I'm just focusing simply on this area beside the nose, and if I'm not happy with the effect, I can just get rid of it without removing all the other adjustments that were already performed. So now I'm building the effect further. I just want to make this transition a little bit smoother to make this line a little bit less visible. Let's zoom out and let's check if we are not overdoing. We can still make it tiny a little bit brighter. So let's keep working with the soft brush with white color, and in this very subtle way we are making this area brighter. Let's work a little bit on the middle part. Okay, so we are almost there. Remember to change size of your brush to adjust it to the area you are working on. Remember to work with left and right square bracket on your keyboard. Let's move over to the right hand side. Let's zoom out. And now I'm going to switch off these both dodge adjustment layers, and you can see that the effect is quite striking. So let's zoom out, and that's the starting point, and after performing dodging we have achieved this effect. So let's have a look if there is any other areas in the image that should be treated. Let's get back to the first dodging adjustment layer, and I'm going to work on this shadow under the eye a little bit further. So as I've mentioned before, for the sake of this video, I'm working really quickly. You can be much more precise, and it's really important to perform dodging and burning the same as the initial cleanup in a proper way. It really pays off to spend time, to be patient, and to get your image to the point where you are happy, and then any other color adjustments will be really pleasure to work with. So I can say that at this point I'm happy with the local dodge. So that's the starting point, that's the result I have achieved. I'm not going to be working on these shadows on the chin, on her nose, as I've mentioned before at the very beginning when we are evaluating this image. This is the lighting that was set. So when it comes to burning, I'm not going to really be burning this image. There is no need. There are no bright areas that should be darkened, so I'm just going to simply leave the burning adjustment layer untouched. I don't have to switch it on and off since it's not affecting the image at all. All we need to do now, the next step, is to change the blend mode of these adjustment layers to luminosity. Since the adjustment was quite strong, and if I switch off the helper, you can see that besides brightening of select areas, we have made them more saturated. So to avoid the side effect, let's simply select these adjustment layers and change their blend mode to luminosity. Let's repeat this for the second dodge adjustment layer. Let's select luminosity. So that way we are not making the color stronger, we are simply working with the luminosity levels in the photograph. That's how our color image looks like after performing dodging, local dodging, and that's the black and white version. So in this video we have performed the local dodging and burning, we have corrected the skin of the model, and let's now move over to the next clip when we will be working on shaping the face with global dodge and burn. Okay, in the previous video we took care of the local dodge and burn, and the main purpose of the local dodge and burn is to retouch the image in a seamless way. So that's the stage before applying the local dodge and burn, and that's the stage after applying dodge and burn. Now in this clip we will be focused on global dodging and burning. That's a favorite part of many artists, of many photographers, since now we will be adding a bit more contrast to the image. We will be applying the global dodging and burning to the selected areas, and here by skillful adjustments we can create really striking effects. So let's move over to our global dodge and burn folder, and as you remember, these curves I have copied from the local dodge and burn. So they are exactly the same. I'm just going to slightly change the settings, since for the global dodge and burn we can go for stronger adjustments. Let's select the dodge adjustment layer, and as you can see I have created this control point and its position quite close to the initial line. I can push it a little bit further to make these adjustments stronger visible. So let's quickly invert the mask so you will see what I'm talking about. The point was created closer to the line and these adjustments were less visible. We can go really a little bit further. So I'm just going to move it, push it slightly further upwards. Let's invert the mask back, and I'm just going to do the same for burning. I'm just going to pull this point slightly downwards. So let's get back to the dodging, and I'm just going to start working on global dodging and burning. The same as when we were working with local dodging and burning, it's important to first look at the image and decide which areas should be affected, what can we do with the image, which areas should be treated. So in case of this photograph, the highlights are already quite strong, specifically in the left-hand side of her face. If we have a look at the histogram, we can see that the histogram, the dynamic range in this image is very rich. So we have a lot of dark tones, a lot of shadows in this image. We have very rich mid-tones that are represented in the middle part of the graph, and we have quite a lot of highlights as well. So it doesn't make sense to push the highlights further, we don't want to clip them, we need to be working in a very subtle way. I just want to maybe make some highlights on the right hand side of the face stronger. I will be brightening the eyes, I will be working a bit on the lips as well. So let's maybe start with dodging a little bit of the forehead. I just want to make this part a little bit brighter. I'm working again with white color with a soft brush, and since I have pushed this point further, I don't need to really change the flow that much. Maybe we can increase flow from 3% to 5%. Let's see how it goes. So let's zoom in and let's focus on the eye. So I'm just going to make this part of the eye a little bit brighter. It's very similar to applying a makeup, since now we are really shaping the face, we are making selected areas in the image brighter, and we will be darkening selected areas as well to add dimension to the image to shape the face. So when you are working with the eye, it's important to select really small size of your brush. Remember that we want to make these changes in a seamless way. We don't want the viewer to immediately notice. We don't want the viewer to notice at all that the image was manipulated. So remember, it's better to work in a very subtle way and to gradually build up the effect. Don't overdo this. And when you are working on dodging and burning, simply switch on and off the adjustment layer to see the result you have already achieved. Since during painting it's almost not visible, the changes that we are applying, they seem to be non-existent. However, after switching the layer on and off, we can see that we already affected the image quite a lot. So let's make this part of the eye a little bit brighter. Let's zoom out. I'm just going to make this beautiful line of her nose a little bit stronger. So notice that I'm working with the light that was present in the image in the first place, the way the image was lit. I'm not creating any artificial highlights. I'm just strengthening the existing highlights, and I will be next strengthening the existing shadows in the image to make it more three-dimensional, to make the contrast stronger. However, I'm not creating anything that wasn't there in the first place. Let's work a bit with the lips. So I'm just going to make the line above her upper lip a little bit stronger. Let's switch off the layer and on again. Let's make the line underneath her lower lip as well a little bit stronger. We can strengthen the highlights in the lips. So exactly the same as when we were working with local dodging and burning, we are brightening selected areas in the image, and next we will be darkening selected areas. Remember that we are working in a non-destructive way, so at any point if we decide that certain adjustments are too strong, we can either swap these colors. So if I hit X on my keyboard, I will jump from white to black color, and for example, I think that the line over the lip is already too strong, so simply by swapping the colors I can paint with black color, and that way I will make this adjustment less visible. So when you are painting, simply keep hitting X on your keyboard, that way you will be swapping those colors. Let's zoom out, and now let's get back to the eye. We can make this area a little bit brighter. So having the mask selected, having the white color selected, I'm just going to decrease size of the brush, and I'm just going to make this part brighter. I could maybe make the flow a little bit higher. I'm going to go for 7%, and that way I will be working faster. Let's switch on and off this layer. Remember to work in a balanced way. Keep building up your adjustment. If you decide that it's enough, you can check by switching on and off the layer. And remember that at any point, if your adjustment is simply overdone, if you decide that it's too much, you can always either swap these colors and paint over with the black, or you can manipulate with the opacity of the layer. However, remember that if you change the opacity, it will be affecting all the adjustments on the dodge layer. It won't affect only those that you decided are too strong. You will be changing all of them. So it's much better to simply swap those color samples and paint with black if you decide that the adjustment is too strong. Now I'm going to make the neck a little bit brighter to strengthen the highlights. Let's paint a little bit over the collarbones. However, the face should be most prominent. Let's switch off this layer and on again. So I'm quite happy with the global dodge and burn. I think that the line under the eyes is a little bit too strong, so I'm just going to, having the brush selected, decrease size of the brush and simply hit X to swap these colors, and I will paint it with black to make this line look a little bit more natural. Okay, let's zoom out again, and now I will take care of the hair. When you are working on the hair, especially when you are dodging highlights in the hair, you can go for higher flow. So let's select 10% and let's get back to white color. I'm hitting B and X on my keyboard to swap the color samples. And now remember to change size of the brush, and that way the highlights will be brighter, and by changing size of the brush they will be looking more natural. So we can paint over these areas in the hair to make them brighter. Let's zoom out, and I can say that at this point we can jump to burning. So with burning we will be affecting luminosity levels in the image as well. We will be darkening darker areas in the image, selected areas, and it works exactly the same as with dodging. So let's select the mask that is added to the burning adjustment layer, and having the white color selected, I will be simply painting over the areas in the picture that I would like to make a little bit darker. Let's go down with the flow. 10% is too much. I'm just going down to 5, and I want to make the eyebrows a little bit darker. We can make the eyelashes a little bit darker, the shadow areas on the eyelid. So by working that way we are increasing contrast, we are making the selected shadow area darker. By doing that we will add more dimension to the image, we will add more depth to the photograph, and we can shape the model's face. So I won't be working a lot with burning. It's basically, as I mentioned before, while dodging, it really reminds me very often of applying makeup. So that before and after, when you are working with dodging and burning, it really takes a bit of practice, and it's helpful if you are working with a tablet, so you can apply these adjustments in a subtle way, in a targeted way. So I've made the eye a little bit darker. We can repeat this here to make the eyelashes a bit darker, and maybe we can strengthen the lips to make the transition between the lower lip and the chin a little bit more defined. I'm just going to darken the line. Remember that in the supporting materials you have access to both files. You can work with the initial image, which doesn't include any of these adjustments, and you have access as well to the final stage, so you can just simply jump to the file which presents the final result, and you can have a look at the masks. You can check all the layers that were already applied. If you would like to have a closer look at the mask and check what you have already painted, simply hit and hold Alt key and click on the mask. So that way we are looking at my global dodge and burn and burning mask. So the bright areas, the white areas in the image in the mask show the areas where I have applied the adjustment, which means in this case that are darkened. Let's now again hold and press Alt key, click on the mask, and now let's have a look at the dodging mask. So let's press and hold Alt key, click on the mask for dodging, and this mask shows where I have brightened the image. This mask shows the dodging in the hair, in the eyes, nose. So let's maybe zoom out, and this is my dodging mask, this is my burning mask. So at this stage I can say that I'm quite happy with the global dodge and burn and local dodge and burn. So now let's quickly compare the state before and after. So this is our image after applying global and local dodge and burn. This is only with local and this is without. So that's our starting point, and that's the image after applying dodging and burning. As I've mentioned before, for the sake of this course, for the sake of this video, I'm working really quickly. You can be much more precise, you can spend much more time and really work on the details. However, in case of this portrait, it's really effective even with these few steps and these few minutes that we have spent while working on the image. So as the next step, remember the same as we have here changed the blend mode of the dodging layers, we have to repeat this for the global dodge and burn as well. So let's very quickly select dodge adjustment layer and let's change its blend mode to luminosity. Let's repeat this for the burn layer as well. So let's select it and let's change the blend mode to luminosity. And now, as the very last step during the dodging and burning stage, we can get rid of the help folder, so we can switch it off. I wouldn't delete it since we are working in a non-destructive way, and at any later stage we can get back to this edit and we can decide, for example, that we would like to make some highlights in this image brighter, or that we would like to work further on shadows. And in this case we will have this layer already existing here, we won't have to create again. So don't delete it, simply disable it, simply make it invisible. So now we are looking at our color image, and again let's switch off the dodge and burn folder. So this is our image before applying dodging and burning, and that's our color image after applying dodging and burning. So after completing the dodge and burn stage, we are ready to jump to the next video where we will be working on luminosity adjustments. See you in the next clip. Okay, our dodge and burn stage is completed. Now we are going to focus on final adjustments of the luminosity levels in the image. As I've mentioned before, this image has already quite dynamic range. Let's move over and have a look at our histogram. As you should know by now, the left-hand side of the histogram represents shadows and blacks in the image. The left edge represents blacks. Then moving towards the middle of the histogram we have midtones, so the middle part of the graph represents midtones in this image, which will be shown here in the background in the midtones of the skin. The right hand side of the graph represents highlights and bright areas. So this peak of information will be related to the highlights in the skin. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make the image a little bit brighter. However, I don't want to make the shadows brighter. I want to maintain this quite dynamic and strong contrast. So I'm going to do this by adding new curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to limit the adjustment only to the midtones and to the highlights area, leaving the shadows untouched. So that way I won't be affecting the left hand side of the histogram at all, which already looks good. I'm just going to make the highlights a little bit stronger. To do this, let's move over to the layers panel and let's add another adjustment layer, curves. I'm just going to make this a little bit shorter so you can clearly see. So let's select curve adjustment layer and let's just rename it. Let's call it luminosity. And I'm just going to group this layer with itself to keep things tidy and organized. So having the luminosity adjustment layer selected, simply hit Command G on your keyboard, and that way this layer will be hidden inside the folder. I'm just going to rename this folder luminosity as well. So let's get access to our adjustment layer. Let's open the folder and let's select the adjustment layer. As I mentioned before, I would like to make the highlights a little bit brighter, so I'm just going to add control point to this line and push it slightly upwards. However, I have to check if I'm not damaging the texture of the skin, and I want to add another control point in the shadow area to block this adjustment from the shadows. I don't want to affect shadows at all. So let's switch off and on. Let's zoom in and let's check if we are maintaining the skin texture. I don't want to blow out highlights. So let's maybe move this point a little bit downwards, and I guess this position will be fine. So let's zoom out and let's quickly switch off and on this adjustment layer so we can see that very quickly in a few seconds we have made the image brighter, and by creating this control point and by positioning it in the shadow area, we are blocking this adjustment from affecting the shadows in the image. So let's again switch it off and on. So that way in this clip very quickly we have adjusted luminosity levels. Let's move over to the next video where we will perform sharpening, and starting on from the next clip we will be working on color. So see you in the next clip. In this video we are going to very quickly sharpen the image, since it will be the very last retouching adjustment, and starting from the next video we will take care of color and we will be creating this gel imitating lighting effect. So now let's focus on sharpening of our image. Let's close the luminosity folder, and that way, as you can see, we have things really tidy and organized. In order to sharpen the image, we will be working with filter, and first let's create a stamp of our layers. To create a stamp, select the very top either layer or folder. I don't know if you are following me and creating all these folders, you don't have to do this, you can keep just layers, but creating folders is a really good habit, and that's where you can see what you are doing. You can hide all the layers that were created before. If I had all these layers open, then my layers panel is getting long and it can be quite confusing. So I just prefer to have it that way. So select either the top folder or top layer, it doesn't matter, just select the top thing on your layer stack, and now hit Alt Shift Command E. That's a shortcut that is creating a stamp layer. Alt Shift Command E. So that way I have created stamp layer, and this layer, it contains all these adjustments. They are just within this one flat layer. I can still get back to the previous stages, to the previous folders, to the previous steps. Here I'm just performing sharpening. So having the stamp layer created, I'm just going to rename it to sharpen, so I will know what this layer is doing. Let's change the blend mode of this layer to overlay, and now let's move over to the Photoshop menu bar. Let's select filter, other, and high pass. So having the high pass filter selected, we will be getting pop-up window, and here, in case of quite subtle portrait like that, we are going to be working with really low radius values. Let's have a look at the image at 100% magnification. So I am hitting Alt Command 0 on my keyboard, Alt Command 0. That's the way that you should be looking at your image when you are working specifically on sharpening, since it doesn't really make sense to sharpen the image if you are looking at really small thumbnail. So having the image at 100%, I hit Alt Command 0, we can adjust the radius. If we move the slider all the way to the left hand side, the sharpening is not visible. We have the value only at 0.1. By pushing the slider towards the right hand side, the sharpening is more and more visible. I don't want to go too far, since with a feminine portrait it's not going to give us flattering results. So I'm just going to stick with the value around maybe 1.3, 1.2. That way we have the image sharpened, but without overdoing this. Let's confirm OK. So that way, in a few seconds, we have applied sharpening to our image. With the sharpening step, we have finished retouching stage of this image. Let's have a look at the initial stage and what we have achieved after applying cleanup, dodge and burn, luminosity adjustments, and sharpening. So at this point we have our image ready for color adjustments. Starting with the next clip, we will take care of color. So see you in the next clip. Okay, so starting from now on, we will be working on applying very strong, very vibrant color grade to our image. So this is the image after retouching, and that's the effect we will be after. So we will be working in two stages. First, we will be working with orange. We will apply the very warm, very strong and saturated orange to the background and to the left-hand side of the face of the model. And during the second step, we will throw this very strong purple violet light on her right hand side of her face. So that's the effect we will be aiming for. Let's get back to our image and let's start working on color. In this video we will begin working on color and we will focus on orange. So let's add new adjustment layer. It's going to be color fill adjustment layer, solid color. Let's select the first option, solid color adjustment layer, and here we are aiming for quite saturated, quite warm shade of yellow. The values I have already selected here when I was preparing the initial version of this image is 221, 152 and 3. So 221 for red, 152 for green and 3 for blue. Let's confirm, let's hit OK. Next, let's change the blend mode of this layer to color and let's decrease opacity as well, since now it's too strong, the effect is just taking over. Let's just move down with opacity. I'm just going to try it out and I'm going to stick with the values around 65%. Next step, I'm just going to mask this effect. I don't want this yellow to be affecting the model's face that strongly, so I'm just going to select the mask. Next, select brush. I'm hitting B on my keyboard. And now I will be painting on a white mask with black color. So I need to swap these color samples. As you remember, we are hitting X on the keyboard. Now the black color is selected. The size of the brush is fine. Let's just increase flow to maybe 40% and let's just paint over the face to get rid of this yellow from the model's face. Maybe let's decrease flow to 20%, 40 was too much. Let's paint further over the face, over the hands. So that way we have the preparation layer set. Next we will be working with selective color adjustment layer to finalize the applying of orange color to our image. So let's move over to the Layers panel and let's selective color from the drop-down menu. Selective color is positioned at the very bottom. So having the selective color added here, we are going to access the properties of this adjustment layer. Let's move over to the properties panel. If you don't have the panel visible, move over to the Photoshop menu bar, select window, and from here you can select properties. So now we will be further working on the yellow color in this image, and what I'm going to do now is I'm after quite strong orangey cast over the image. And notice that with the selective color adjustment layer, we can be selecting either particular colors. So from the colors drop-down menu, we can select either one of these colors listed below. We can select reds, yellows, greens, and so on. However, this tool is very flexible, and apart from certain range of colors, we can select luminosity ranges. So apart from colors, we can select white, which will mean that we have selected highlight. We can select neutrals, which will mean midtones in the histogram. And we can select blacks, which will mean that we have selected the range of shadows. Since I'm after adding strong cast to the image, I will be selecting neutrals. Remember that if you would select highlight or blacks, typically it always depends on the image, of course, that you're working with, but typically the highlights will be affecting much more limited area in the image, the same blacks. However, if you select neutrals, this adjustment will be applied all over the whole image. Let's start working with these adjustments with the values. So having the neutral selected from the colors drop-down menu, now we can in a very powerful, very precise way control how these particular colors listed here are affecting the neutrals. So let's take a look at the first slider, cyan. On the color wheel, the color opposite to cyan is red, which means that if I start pulling this slider towards the right hand side, I will be adding more cyan to the midtones in this image. However, if I will go for negative values, notice this input field here. If I go for negative values, I will be adding red to the image. Let's just get back to 0, and it works exactly the same for all the other sliders. The color opposite to magenta is green, which means that if I go for negative values, I will be adding green to the midtones in the image. If I will be pushing this slider towards the right hand side, I will be adding magenta to the midtones. The color opposite to yellow is blue, so if I push the slider towards the left hand side, I am adding blue in the neutrals in the midtones range, and if I push it towards the right hand side, I will be adding yellow. So let's get back to 0. The last slider, black, simply means that if I will be pushing the slider towards the right hand side, I will be adding more black to the neutrals, and if I will be pushing the slider towards the left hand side, I will be making the neutrals, the midtones in my image, brighter. Very rarely we will manipulate with the last slider. It's much better to work with either levels or curves. So let's now focus on color adjustments. So first of all, I know that I would like to add more yellow to the image, so I'm just going to manipulate with this slider and go for this really rich, very saturated orange-yellow tone. Specifically in the background, I will mask it on the face in the further part of this edit. So for the yellow, I'm going to select the value 65. Going upwards, the magenta slider, let's just see. If I go towards the left hand side, I'm going on the colder side, adding green. That's exactly not what I'm after. Let's just add a little bit more of warm tones, a little bit more of magenta. However, I don't want to overdo this, so the value around 6 is perfect. And with the cyan slider, this will be cyan to the right hand side and red to the left hand side. I'm going to definitely add more red. I don't want to add cold colors, so I will be pushing the slider to the value around negative 45. So to quickly recap, we have selected the neutrals range, which means the midtones range in the histogram and the midtones in our image, and the values we went for is negative 45 for cyan, 6 for magenta, and 65 for yellow. This is the result we have achieved after manipulating with the selective color adjustment layer. So as the next step, we are going to select these two layers and we are going to group them. So let's hit Command G and I'm going to rename this folder as yellow. So we will know that inside this folder we have all these adjustment layers that are applying yellow. Since I have these two adjustment layers inside and I have already masked that one, I'm not going to mask this adjustment layer here using the mask. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to assign mask to the overall folder, so at one go I can apply the further adjustments, I can polish the look I have achieved, and I want to get rid a bit of this orangey from the face. So having the folder selected, I'm hitting on this icon here, that way I have added mask to my image. And since I want to maintain the effect, I want to only slightly make it less visible in selected areas of the face. I will be painting on a white mask with back color, which is already selected here. If you have white color, simply hit X. That way you will swap the color samples and select brush either from Photoshop toolbar or by hitting B on your keyboard. Flow 20 is fine. So let's adjust size of the brush, and actually I'm going to go down with flow. 20 is too much, I'm going to go for 5%, and I'm just going to paint over selected areas in the picture to make this yellow a little bit less visible in the face. Okay, so at this point I am happy with the way the yellow is affecting my image. In the next video I will be applying the violet, the purple light, and then after having these two colors in my image I can perform the final adjustment. So at this point I don't really know if the mask is already in its final stage or if it would benefit from further fine-tuning. So I'm going to leave it as it is at this point. Now add the other light, the other color, and in the end I can balance all these effects to create my final artwork. So let's jump to the next clip and let's add the violet light to our image. Okay, in this clip we are going to add the second color light to our image. We will be working with selective color as well. So let's move over to the layers panel and let's select the selective color from the drop-down menu. So that way we have added the selective color. I'm just going to rename it to blue, and let's just group this layer with itself at this stage. And let's rename the folder to blue. So by closing this folder we'll have separately blue and yellow. Let's open the blue and let's select the adjustment layer, the selective color adjustment layer. Let's move over to the properties panel and let's start working with the color. As you can see here, we have already neutrals range selected, which is going to be appropriate. The same way as we were working with the yellow color, we had the neutrals range selected. That way we were able to very strongly affect the image. We are going to apply now the blue, the violet light on the right hand side of the model, and we want this color to be equally strong to this orangey yellow. So the neutral range is perfect, so let's stick with the neutrals, and now let's start manipulating with the sliders. So to add this very strong bluish violet light to the image, we will be working with the yellow slider, since as you remember the opposite color to yellow is blue. So by pulling this slider towards the left hand side, I will be adding blue color into the midtones in this image. So I'm just going to pull it really far. Let's stick with the value maybe around -75. Now I'm going to add cyans to the image to balance a bit this color and to make it a little bit more on a blue side. And with the cyans, let's maybe move backwards. With the cyans I'm quite happy with the value 39. With magenta, I don't think it makes sense to move the slider. I don't want to make it much colder either, so maybe the value at -3 is fine. Let's just switch this layer on and off, so that way we have added the second color to our image. However, it is covering the yellow and the orange, so all I need to do now is to just mask this effect. So let's move back to the layers panel, and I'm going to invert mask. I'm hitting Command I on my keyboard. Now this adjustment is not visible at all, and I'm just going to reveal it in the same way as I was working with dodging and burning. So I will be painting on a black mask with white color with soft brush. So let's hit X on the keyboard to swap the color samples. I can increase flow, so I can go for the value maybe around 15%, and we will see how it goes. Let's decrease size of the brush. Let's select mask. It's important to select the mask. If we had just the layer selected, we wouldn't be able to paint on the layer on the mask at all. It's important that the mask is selected. Select the brush from the toolbar or hit B on your keyboard. And now let's just keep painting on the face to reveal the color in the areas that we want to. So my idea for this image was to create this kind of gel effect as if the model was shot with the gel light, and let's just keep the left hand side warm, yellowy, orangey, and let's create this very strong color effect on her right hand side on the face and a bit on her body. Okay, let's decrease size of the brush and maybe let's go for slightly stronger flow, 20%. Let's zoom in and let's make sure, let's maybe check the mask. I'm hitting Alt on my keyboard, hitting the mask, clicking on the mask, and that way I can see that we have the full visibility of the layer here in the area with the white color, so it's not going to get any stronger no matter how long I will be painting over this area. So let's just apply a bit more here on the highlights. Here I actually think I went too far, so I want to get rid of the purple of the blue color, so I'm just hitting X on my keyboard. That way I will swap the color samples, and by painting with the black I will get rid of the light from here. Let's just move downwards, let's swap the samples again, X, and let's paint over the lips here a little bit more, over the chin. Let's zoom out and let's paint over the arm a little bit stronger. Okay, so let's switch this layer on and off. Let's see if there is any other areas that we haven't affected. That's the image before masking and after masking. The layer before masking and after masking. Okay, so at this stage I can say I'm very happy with the final result. We have added the yellow color at the first stage of coloring the image, and next we have added the blue color. So that way we have finished our edit. Let's just get rid of these helping panels and let's just keep the layers. So I'm hitting Function and F7. Let's zoom in and let's just switch off all the adjustment layers, and that way we can get back to the initial image. That was our starting point and that's the final result. So going step by step, first we were working on the cleanup, next we have performed dodge and burn. As you can see here, the dodge and burn step is really making a huge difference. If we would perform the color adjustment without dodging and burning, the image is not as effective. So I know that dodging and burning is a quite time-consuming technique and it takes time, of course, to master it, but believe me that it's really worth and spending time with this technique, learning how to apply it correctly. It will make you much more confident with every next image you will make it faster. You will work with this technique in a much more confident and efficient way. So I would recommend definitely to learn how to dodge and burn your images. Next we were applying the very subtle luminosity corrections. We sharpened the image, and in the last two videos we have applied this gel-like color effect. Let's actually group these two folders to be consequent, and let's just create one folder and let's rename it, let's call it color. So that way we have all the things organized and we can quickly get to any of these adjustments. Remember that apart from the sharpening, we can be at this point moved at the very top of the layer stack. All these folders, all these steps are part of our non-destructive workflow. So as I've mentioned before, if I would like at this point to make, let's say, highlights in her hair slightly brighter, slightly stronger, we can again get back to the global dodge and burn, we can get back to the dodging, and now we can still work with brush with white color and we can still affect the image, we can make them stronger. So it's really powerful way of working, very effective. Remember that at all time you have access to all these folders, you can close this image, you can save it, and you can get back to it after few days, weeks, months, and you will be able to still fine-tune these adjustments. Exactly the same applies to color. So we have created in this folder these two adjustments. We have added yellow and blue to our image. However, notice that without removing these adjustments, I can simply duplicate this whole folder by clicking Command J. I can make this one, the first one, invisible, and I can, without making all these layers all over again, I can just jump into the yellows and simply by changing this color, so I can go for a bit more saturated orange, maybe even something more dramatic. Let's go for this kind of color, and by manipulating with these adjustments or by removing them at all, now we can jump to the blue and we can change the values for these adjustments. And let's say if we would add, let's say, orange instead of the blue, so we can go for yellow, we can add maybe more magenta, a little bit less red. I want to just illustrate that you can, working with the non-destructive workflow, always get back to these layers and perform further adjustments. And this allows you really huge flexibility and opens the door to further experimenting. So notice that in a few seconds it's not really precisely done because I was targeting the purple and orange, so I have fine-tuned these values, but very quickly I have just duplicated the folder and applied different colors. So bear in mind that working in a non-destructive way is really the most powerful, most flexible way of performing any adjustments in Photoshop. Okay, so that way we have completed our first edit. This was a warm-up. So now we are ready to move over to the next section and start working on the second edit. Starting from the second section, I will be moving a little bit faster to avoid repetition. So whenever you're in doubt, you can always move back to the first section and you can check how these adjustments work. Remember, it's very helpful, it's crucial to get access to the supporting materials, and from there you can open the final file. From there, if you get stuck at any point, you can always check how these adjustments should be set, how they should be performed. So I hope you have enjoyed the first section of the course. There are 2 more ahead, and now we are going to jump to the second one, to the second part of the course, and work on the second edit in completely different colors. Again, very saturated, very strong. However, the portrait is different, the look is different. So see you in the next video.